Have you ever felt the weight of silence pressing in on you? That moment when the night stretches long and you scroll through your phone hoping for a message that never comes? The room is still, yet inside, your thoughts echo loudly. In that space, loneliness settles like an unwelcome guest. This is a feeling almost everyone knows. It arrives after a breakup, when the presence you depended on has vanished. It appears when you move to a new city, surrounded by people but tethered to none. Sometimes it even shows itself in the middle of a crowd, where laughter and conversation surround you, yet you remain unseen. The sting of loneliness is universal, a shadow that spares no one. Most of us see loneliness as a curse, as something to be escaped at any cost. We search for noise, for company, for distractions that can drown out the ache. But when the noise fades, when the distractions fall away, the silence returns. It lingers, whispering questions we'd rather not face. Am I enough for myself? What remains of me when others are absent? But what if loneliness is not the enemy? What if, instead, it carries a hidden purpose? Could it be that this pain is not punishment, but invitation, an opening into a deeper kind of strength we have not yet discovered? The Stoics believed the answer was yes. They taught that freedom is not found in escaping loneliness, but in transforming it. Through self-mastery, through perspective, through courage, the ache of isolation can become something else entirely. Loneliness becomes less a chain and more a key, unlocking the ability to stand whole and unshaken. In this light, the silence changes. It no longer feels like emptiness. It becomes a space where you can encounter yourself, fully, honestly, without masks. And perhaps in that meeting, you will discover that the one you were searching for in others has been within you all along. If loneliness can change its shape, then perhaps the real question is this: what separates loneliness from solitude? On the surface, they may look the same. A person sitting alone, no voices in the room, no one to lean on. Yet inside, they could not be more different. Loneliness is the weight of absence. It is the restless craving for someone who is not there, the hollow ache that insists you are incomplete. It is the gnawing thought that without the presence or approval of another, you somehow lose your worth. Loneliness is the hunger for connection that feels forever unmet. But solitude is something else entirely. It is not an empty space to be feared, but a chosen stillness, a deliberate retreat into the self. Solitude is when the silence ceases to be heavy and instead becomes alive with clarity. It is the pause where you discover your own company, and in that company, a surprising kind of peace. The Stoics understood this difference well. Marcus Aurelius wrote of retreating into the inner citadel, a sanctuary within, untouched by the chaos of the world. Solitude for him was not loneliness, but freedom. It was the chance to meet his own soul, to reflect without interruption, to anchor himself before stepping back into the storm of public life. When you reframe the silence, when you no longer see it as punishment but as possibility, the experience changes. Loneliness begins to lose its sting. What once felt like abandonment transforms into an invitation, an opening to step into solitude, to breathe, to realign. And so the choice stands before each of us. Do we see our aloneness as a wound or as a door? Do we treat silence as an enemy or as a companion? In that decision lies the difference between despair and strength, between being emptied and being renewed. The truth is, loneliness often frightens us because we have not yet learned how to be at ease with ourselves. But when solitude is embraced, it becomes one of life's greatest teachers. And in learning to stand alone, we discover the first step toward a freedom that no one can take from us. If solitude is not an enemy but a teacher, then what wisdom did the Stoics find in being alone? They did not fear silence. They did not resist it. Instead, they welcomed it as a return to the self. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, Nowhere you can go is more peaceful, more free of interruptions than your own soul. For him, the truest refuge was not a distant retreat in the mountains or an escape from society. It was inward. Within the stillness of the self, he discovered a sanctuary that no crowd could disturb, no absence could weaken. Seneca reminded his students that a wise person is never truly alone. Even in silence, they carry with them the company of their thoughts, the guidance of philosophy, and the presence of every lesson they have absorbed. To such a mind, solitude is not emptiness. It is a conversation with the deepest part of oneself. And Epictetus, ever practical, taught that companionship is something we cannot control. People will enter and leave our lives, sometimes by choice, sometimes by chance, sometimes by loss. To build our happiness upon their presence is to hand over our peace to forces we cannot command. His advice was simple: learn contentment within. If you can find steadiness when others are absent, you will never be enslaved by their coming or their leaving. The core of this wisdom is clear. True strength is not found in the presence of others, but in the courage to be with yourself. Imagine the difference it makes to sit alone, not with fear, but with ease. To feel the silence not as a prison, but as freedom. This is what the Stoics practiced. This is what they invite us to discover. And once you learn this, something shifts. You stop running from aloneness. You stop seeing it as proof of your lack. Instead, you begin to see it as a training ground, the place where you forge inner steadiness, where you anchor your peace so deeply that nothing outside can shake it. From this perspective, the question is no longer, how do I escape being alone? The question becomes, what can I learn here in this silence that I could never learn in the noise? And perhaps the answer is that within the very ache of loneliness lies a hidden gift waiting to be uncovered. If the Stoics were right, then being alone is not something to run from, but something to lean into. And yet, why does loneliness hurt so deeply? Why does it pierce the heart in ways few other feelings can? The answer lies in what loneliness reveals. Pain is a teacher. Just as hunger reminds us of our need for food, loneliness uncovers the attachments we cling to: attention, validation, approval, the comfort of being seen. In the silence of absence, those cravings rise to the surface. Loneliness exposes them with a clarity we cannot ignore. It forces us to ask a question many avoid. Am I enough for myself? Without the applause of others, without the constant reassurance of company, do I still feel whole? The ache of loneliness is not just about missing people. It is about confronting ourselves. And for many, that confrontation is the hardest of all. But within this sharpness lies a hidden gift. Because when you can no longer rely on others to fill the silence, you begin to discover new resources within. The friend who is abandoned may uncover a well of independence they never knew they had. The traveler, alone in a new city, may find creativity and resilience blossoming in the very soil of isolation. The silence becomes a mirror, one that does not flatter, but one that tells the truth. And in that truth, growth begins. Loneliness, then, is not merely the absence of people. It is the absence of peace with oneself. And once you begin to make peace with your own presence, the silence no longer feels like punishment. It feels like possibility. Think of it this way. Loneliness is the spark that pushes you inward. It is uncomfortable, yes, but without it, few would ever search for depth. Few would learn to sit with themselves long enough to uncover strength, patience, clarity. In this sense, loneliness is not a curse. It is a compass, pointing you back to the center you have always carried. And once you see this, the question changes yet again. Loneliness is no longer something to endure, but something to transform. But how? The Stoics, ever practical, offered remedies, not abstract ideas, but daily practices that can turn this ache into a source of stability. If loneliness is not a curse but a compass, then the next step is to learn how to walk in the direction it points. The Stoics did not leave us with vague encouragements. They offered practices, simple, steady habits that transform the silence from emptiness into strength. The first is journaling, but not as a mere record of events. Think of it as a self-dialogue. When you write to yourself, you become both the speaker and the listener. A blank page can turn into a companion, a mirror that receives your fears and returns them with clarity. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections in this way, not for an audience, but to remind himself how to live. You can do the same. Write as though you are both the student and the teacher of your own soul. Another practice is the evening reflection. Each night before sleep, look back on your day with calm honesty. Ask yourself, did I depend on others for validation, or did I act with integrity regardless of who was watching? Did I cling to approval, or did I choose what was right even if no one noticed? These questions strip away illusions. They remind you that worth is not borrowed from the eyes of others, but grown within your own choices. The Stoics also taught us to reframe the words we use with ourselves. Instead of saying, I am alone, practice saying, I am with myself. Notice the shift. What once sounded like deprivation begins to feel like presence. Language shapes thought, and thought shapes experience. By changing a single phrase, you remind yourself that your own company is not lacking. It is living. There is also the practice of cultivating presence in the simplest of tasks. To walk and truly notice the rhythm of your steps. To drink tea and feel its warmth spreading through your hands. To sit by the window and watch the rain fall without rushing to fill the silence. These small acts ground you in the present moment. They remind you that life is not missing. It is happening right here, even in solitude. And finally, gratitude for solitude itself. This may sound strange at first, but to thank the quiet for what it gives you changes the relationship entirely. Solitude offers time to reset, to create, to reflect. It is the soil in which deep roots grow. Instead of fearing it, bow to it. Treat it as a rare gift, not an enemy. Through these practices, loneliness begins to lose its edge. The silence becomes less of a void and more of a space where you are not diminished, but renewed. And this becomes especially vital in the world we now inhabit, where loneliness has taken on a new, sharper form in the age of constant connection. The remedies of the Stoics feel timeless, yet they become even more necessary when we look at the world we live in today. For never in history have humans been more connected, and yet, never have so many felt so alone. Think of it. Your phone buzzes with notifications. Your feeds overflow with voices, images, opinions. You can reach across oceans in an instant, yet still sit in a room and feel unseen. This is the paradox of our age. Technology brings bodies closer, but it does not always touch the soul. Social media, for all its promise of connection, often leaves us emptier than before. We scroll past curated lives, comparing our quiet reality to someone else's highlight reel. The mind whispers, they are loved, they are living, and you are not. What was meant to connect us often deepens the very ache we try to escape. The Stoics would not have been surprised. They warned against building identity on the shifting opinions of others. 1,000 years before likes and followers, they saw the danger of tying your worth to recognition. For if your peace depends on approval, it will vanish the moment approval fades. And so, the remedy remains the same. Detach your value from the crowd. Do not measure your worth in numbers, in hearts, in views. Instead, return to the only ground that does not shake. Your character, your actions, your integrity when no one is watching. The Stoics remind us, connection that begins within cannot be broken by silence outside. This does not mean we reject others, or that we must retreat from the world. It means that true connection begins with wholeness. Only when you are no longer desperate for validation can you approach another without fear of loss. Only when you are at peace in solitude can you share yourself freely in community. And from this place of steadiness, loneliness begins to transform into something else, It becomes not a barrier to love, but a preparation for it. Because once you learn to stand whole on your own, the way you give and receive love changes forever. If the modern world tempts us to seek constant validation, then solitude teaches us to return to ourselves. And once you have learned to be whole within, something powerful shifts. Your relationships begin to change. The Stoics never suggested that we abandon human connection. To the contrary, they valued love, friendship, family, and community deeply. But they taught that the healthiest bonds grow not from neediness, but from abundance. If loneliness is transformed into solitude, then love is transformed as well. It becomes freer, lighter, unburdened by fear. Think of how most people approach relationships, searching for someone to complete them, to heal the emptiness they cannot face alone. And yet, such love is fragile. It clings, it demands, it fears loss at every turn. But when you have already discovered wholeness within, you no longer come to another as a beggar, but as a giver. You do not seek to be filled. You seek to share what is already overflowing. Epictetus gave a hard but liberating reminder. When you kiss your child, whisper to yourself, "Tomorrow they may die." Not because love should be cold, but because love must be honest. To love deeply, we must remember the fragility of all things. When we accept that everything we cherish can be lost, we begin to love without chains. We hold more gently, but also more truly. This is the paradox. Once you conquer loneliness, you can love more freely. Because you no longer fear being alone, you do not clutch desperately at those you love. You care without trying to possess. You give without demanding in return. And the love that grows from this place is purer, stronger, and far less fragile. So the journey of loneliness does not end in isolation. It ends in a deeper capacity for connection. By first learning to be at peace with yourself, you prepare your heart to meet others not with fear, but with freedom. And in that freedom, love becomes not a remedy for loneliness, but a celebration of the wholeness you already carry. And so the silence that once ached now becomes the soil where love can grow. Love that does not cling, love that does not fear, love that is steady because it flows from a heart already rooted in itself. If love itself becomes freer once loneliness is transformed, then the circle begins to close. What started as an ache in the silence has now become a path leading not only to strength, but to deeper connection. And so we return to where we began. That quiet night, the phone screen glowing, the silence pressing in. But now the image has changed. The silence is no longer heavy. It is not proof of emptiness. It is a space alive with possibility. A space where you meet yourself fully without needing to escape. A space where solitude steadies you, where philosophy reminds you that nothing essential is missing. The Stoics remind us, loneliness loses its grip when you realize you are already whole. The cure is not outside you. It has always been within. And once you discover this, the silence no longer frightens you. It begins to nourish you. It becomes not a void, but a home. And from that home, you walk into the world differently. You speak with more steadiness. You love with more freedom. You live with more clarity because you are no longer running from yourself. The ache of loneliness has become a teacher, and its lesson is simple. You are enough. So the next time the silence comes, do not rush to escape it. Sit with it. Listen to it. Let it show you what you have been avoiding, and let it guide you back to the strength you already carry. In that moment, you will see what the Stoics saw, that the cure for loneliness is not found in the noise of the world, but in the stillness of your own soul. And if these reflections have spoken to you, if they have given you even a small spark of peace, take a moment to share your thoughts. Leave a reflection of your own, so that others walking this same path may feel less alone. And if you wish to continue exploring, to keep walking deeper into philosophy and inner strength, let this be an invitation. Join the journey by staying connected here. Together we can keep discovering the wisdom that turns silence into strength. When the silence comes again, greet it gently, for it is not your enemy, it is your teacher. And in its quiet embrace, you will find yourself.